thank you for attending a session this evening beyond the big game here with the Newhouse School and the discussion on the Super Bowl. I'm so excited to have you all here this evening. Thank you for joining us. We have a special treat for you. I am so excited for this evening and to hear from Professor Santos Suoso, who I'm going to introduce you all here in a minute. But I would say to everyone who's joining us, thank you. For alumni, prospective students, family, and friends, thank you all for joining us. And before we start, I do want to make a acknowledgement, as we always do at Syracuse University, is Syracuse University would like to acknowledge with respect of the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, and the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse now stands. So we want to thank you all for joining us. And as I said before, we have such an amazing treat for you all. It is my pleasure to introduce you all to Professor Michelle Santos Suoso, who's a professor of practice here at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Professor Santos Suoso has served as an editor for Hits Magazine in Hollywood since 2014. She has over a 30-year career spanned in music, in broadcasting, digital, and public industries. She's also worked with record companies and marketing and promotion and artist development and creation. She also served as a vice president for programming at Dash Radio and vice president for artist relations at Napster, and the founder of Dome Entertainment as well. So without further ado, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to the lady of the evening. And as we say in music, I'm going to pass the mic to Professor Michelle Santos Suoso. And before we start, because it is Rock the Show, and then also because I am from Michigan and Eminem is performing, so I got to get ready for you tonight. I got my Detroit hat on. I got my sunglasses ready. So Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. Everyone sit back, relax, and enjoy the session. Michelle, it's all yours.
Wes, that's amazing. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. I'm really thrilled to give this presentation. The Super Bowl is going to be amazing this year, the halftime historic. But also the Super Bowl has a really rich history as well. So let me share my screen and we will get into this right away. So I think where we should start with this is the history. Just a brief recap of, where did the halftime show come from? There's always halftimes in the Super Bowl. The very first one took place in 1967. And usually it was marching bands. And the very first one featured the Three Stooges, which was a comedy trio. The University of Arizona and the Grambling State Marching Bands played up for the whole 25 years up until the 90s. The halftime shows were really, they were just dancing, drill teams, marching bands, really just football-centric entertainment. This picture that you see here is a group that used to perform regularly. They were called Up With People, and they were like a dance troupe that would do synchronized dances, and that was always the really big deal for Super Bowl. And for over 2 decades, that is what continued as the halftime show. The transition to it sort of becoming centered around pop stars began in the 90s, in 1991, the Super Bowl that happened at Tampa Stadium. And it was produced by the Walt Disney Company because, of course, they have Walt Disney World there. And to get more attention around what they were trying to do and to make it more of a spectacle, they integrated the kind of the boy band of the era, which was New Kids on the Block. And the best way to describe them is they were sort of the One Direction or the BTS of their time. They were gigantic pop stars. And this BuzzFeed article kind of points it out. It's that, New Kids on the Block are really the band that kind of changed the landscape, or began to, in terms of the halftime show. But it really was about Disney. You can kind of see from this picture here, they were really promoting that Small World as being introduced at Disney World. And that was kind of the way that the show was themed around. So it wasn't a straight pop concert yet. The following year in 92, the Super Bowl hired Gloria Estefan. She was from a big group called Miami Sound Machine. And it was interesting what happened in the landscape, because they had this musical performer. This was the second year in the row that this was happening. So the rival network, Fox, aired a live special of one of their premiere television shows. It was called In Living Color. In Living Color was sort of like Saturday Night Live, except the cast members during this time were people like Jim Carrey. Jamie Foxx was a cast member. Jennifer Lopez was a cast member. She was a Fly Girl dancer. So it was a superstar lineup. And Fox's show drew 22 million viewers away from the Super Bowl telecast on CBS. And it was a real wake-up call, because at the end of the day, even though it's a game, the way that broadcast networks work, it's based on advertising revenue. So they want the ratings. So this was really like, whoa, what are we going to do about this? Well, they regrouped. In 1993, after Fox beat them in the ratings during the halftime, CBS and their partners kind of got together with the NFL and thought, you know what, we really have to up the ante here, and how are we going to do that? So they pitched the idea of doing a live concert style performance, what we see to this day from top contemporary musical artists. And because they wanted to begin it with a bang, they hired the biggest pop star, not just in the United States, but in the world. And that was Michael Jackson. It was Michael Jackson who really was the person that, and the star that transformed the Super Bowl halftime show into the pop culture moment that it is now, because his show was incredible. It broke every ratings record. After 1993, the NFL made a point to always attract top talent to their halftime show, and the mold was set from that time forward. So now we have the modern Super Bowl halftime show, the one that we're all accustomed to seeing, to anticipating. It's always news, it's always exciting, and there's always a viral moment that comes out of it. But you can kind of see, this is just for the last 10 years or so, how superstar driven the halftime show has been. And there's a couple of unique things that they really look for when they're booking these acts. Of course, they want to have a performer who has a ton of hits and has a really mainstream wide audience, but they also have to be dynamic live performers. And the most important thing is they usually have to be of that moment, either the biggest pop star of that time or the current #1 record. There's always something really unique to that artist in the year that they actually perform. And you can kind of see just through the lineup here, they've done a really incredible job of attracting the top talent in music. And that is because this is the most coveted live gig by all music artists. And we'll get to what some of them have even said about how they dream about performing at the Super Bowl a little bit later. So halftime behind the scenes is chaotic. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how this is executed, but the best way to kind of show you exactly what they have to do to get this done is to run a video time lapse of what happens from the second the halftime starts and we go to commercials and what they're actually doing in that stadium. So that kind of gives you, oh, this won't, you know, It always does a really awesome job. PowerPoint will never let me just go to the next one. We've got to exit out. So that was time lapse, and it was going by really fast. You saw how all the people were coming out with the stages and running around and assembling it. Well, moving the stage center field really is the toughest part of it, and part of that is because they only have 6 minutes to do all this. To give you an idea of the equivalent in the live music world, when an artist pulls up to like a venue, like a stadium in your local town, it takes the production crew an entire day, sometimes, 18, 19 hours to set that stage. So the Super Bowl has perfected this to the point of 6 minutes. And every arena is different. Each venue needs a special approach. To deliver this correctly, they start planning it in June. So even though it happens in February the next year, they're already starting to plan, how do we execute this? It takes 8 to 9 months of work for just a 12 to 14 minute long performance. And performances are never long than 14 minutes because in broadcast time, that's 1/4 hour. So you got to get to the next commercial break. The artist has 14 minutes to really give the performance of their life. And as we kind of saw with that video, the stage essentials are being wheeled out by like giant teams of people. It's like 12 people, the pieces of the stage. There's 18 carts, 6-member teams. They're all hooking it up and getting it together. And they've got to do this correctly with absolute precision, because imagine if, something happens and the stage is not even and the performer trips or something happens. So they rehearse this thoroughly for weeks and weeks and weeks in advance, so that by the time the actual game day happens, they have it down to a science. And like air traffic controllers, there are team leaders with headsets that are directing the team so that they get everything done as quick as possible. It is fascinating to see in person. And so far, every single year, there's never been an incident with like the stage setup. They do a flawless job every year. It's a credit to just the awe of production. So we had a SU alum who shared in the Bandier program with us. He came and spoke to our class and shared with us some of the work that he does behind the scenes with the Super Bowl. And these are some behind the scenes pictures that he gave us. He's a jib operator, and that is the boom crane that you see there. All of the sound and the camera crews that come in to actually execute the halftime show, it's not the same cameras that are actually filming the game. So not only does an entire stage setup have to, and then everything, all the, frills of the production of the artist, but the camera crews and the sound people that are actually making it happen. This is another couple of pictures of the attending camera crew that is doing just the halftime show. It's so highly choreographed that the artists also have to rehearse regularly, because there are no camera moves or shots that are not really pre-choreographed. Everything is on a really tight blueprint of when it needs to happen, where the artist is standing, where they move, where the cast moves, all of that. It is quite a big deal. And then in terms of like the sound design, Pat Botzell, he's been doing this for the last 20 Super Bowls. He's the main engineer behind the sound booth that you can see here, who makes sure that it sounds right, that everything is, that the mics are okay, that the levels are proper, that the mix is good. So that is the engineering feat of this show. He's incredibly experienced. As you can see here, he does the Oscars, the Emmy Awards, Country Music Awards, presidential inaugurations. He's highly experienced, and that's really what he brings to this event, is his enduring expertise. So here's kind of a schematic of a stage design. Creative planning for this, once the NFL figures out who they want to perform at the show, begins in June. It takes a great amount of time to figure out, what the show is actually going to be about. The NFL will hire promoters to deal with the artists, and the agents will do the actual bookings, but the NFL has the final word on who performs. Jay-Z's Rock Nation has been in charge of doing the artist, booking the artist for the last 2 years. 2020 was the first year with the J-Lo and Shakira that Rock Nation had taken over. So they did 2020, 2021 with The Weeknd, and we'll get to how his show is so unique in a second. But the producers, they have to get together and develop a concept for the program. So the biggest task is fitting all of the hits that the artist may have and their co-performers in that 14 minutes. And it has to be tightly choreographed as well. So, you know, if you have a bunch of hits, you're not going to be able to sing all 3 minutes. You might get to, you know, a minute, maybe sometimes some songs, you might just do one chorus of it, but that is what they're working out with the artist. Trying to figure out what songs in what order, what will be exciting, how will the other performers fit into that. And then once the songs are picked, then the scenery and the cast and the special effects that make it exciting are kind of layered over that. And again, it takes months of planning to do this. So in terms of the performers, you know, it's superstars who are typically the featured performers for Super Bowl halftime show, but that doesn't matter if you're Beyonce or you're Bruno Mars. It takes months and months of preparation to rock this show. The pressure to make a career-defining performance is very real, and to avoid having a misstep that might make you go viral is equally as important. So when you're live in 180 countries and you've got everybody in the world watching you, you want to make this the most dynamic live performance of your life, and only rehearsals will create that perfection. So even someone as accomplished as Beyonce, months and months of rehearsals with dancers, and then more months with just the choreography, planning it, getting the staging right so that everything is perfect on game day. When you just a couple of quotes of what artists have said directly about what goes into their prep and how they actually have you know, internalized this event. Lady Gaga said she's been planning her performance since she was a little kid, and she worked out every single day for several months. J-Lo called the Super Bowl her whole life's dream, and started, you know, rehearsing as soon as she got the call from the NFL, which was a full year before she actually performed. Shakira practiced 6 days a week with dance-based cardio. And the reason why the artists do that is because they are singing live and moving around on these massive stages. So you have to actually be physically in shape to accomplish that. And it requires them getting it together. Madonna, you know, was 53 and has been on multiple world tours, and talked about how the Super Bowl halftime show was the hardest she had ever worked in. The most, she says here, the most freaked out I've ever been was trying to do a major show. Katy Perry texted other artists to figure out, like, you know, to get tips from them about how to accomplish this. And, you know, The Weeknd, he was the star last year and talked about how everyone grows up watching the world's biggest acts, and you can only dream of being in that position. What was such an interesting full circle moment about The Weeknd doing his show last year is, in many moments during that show, he paid homage to Michael Jackson himself, who kicked off this whole spirit of what the event has become. So it was pretty special. Let's talk about The Weeknd, because he really pulled something really unique off last year. I'm sure a lot of you saw this performance. And because it happened during the pandemic and during a time where it was very uncertain, touring wasn't back up, his show had the most unique challenges of any Super Bowl show prior. And as we've kind of already talked about, just the feat of accomplishing this is considerable as it is. So it got piled on so that they could do this successfully. It really came down to planning and more planning. So this was the second year that Rock Nation was in charge. Executive producer Jesse Collins is the director of these shows under Rock Nation. So they put in what could only be described as astonishing logistics and organization, typically reserved for like a military operation, in terms of how strict they had to go about it, how disciplined they had to be about what they had to accomplish. They had team members who would get tested daily. And it's so many different people, directors, talent, producers, camera operators. And if one of them got sick, they had to have an entire separate crew of standby professionals that would be ready to step in if at the last minute or at any time during the rehearsal and the production, they couldn't be there because they had to isolate. So they had to actually do 2 teams at once to accomplish this. And they had to trim down. We saw all those people like moving around on that stage to get it all there. Well, that's 3,000 people of like, to help with the production. In COVID era, you got to trim that down. So they went from, what is over 3,000 staff typically to down to a little over 1,000. And that was the core crew to pull off that 14-minute performance. Another thing that made it really unique, and what was cool about this, is I'm not sure if the audience was even really super tuned in to what they were doing on a production level, but they had to make full use of a stadium that was 3/4 empty. There was really no audience last year for the Super Bowl. So large portions of that venue were available for production value that would normally not be so if there were like 65,000 people in the game. To give you an example of something where they specifically did something that made use of the stadium, you may remember this particular moment during the show where this is actually in the stands. They built like a custom set and put the neon lights around there. You can see the Weeknd and how he moved back and forth in that area. But this was an example of how they had to make the show dynamic in a different way. They just couldn't do it from center field. You would have been able to see that the stadium was empty. But if they use the stadium space in a clever way, they could still make it dynamic. So from a production level, this was so genius. You probably also remember this. Remember this moment when he went through that maze and he had the camera and it was shaking and he was singing at the same time. And what was so amazing about this is not only is it exceedingly clever in terms of the limitations they had and the creativity that they had to bring to the production in order to make it compelling with the limitations that were around them. But, if you remember when this happened, people were so entertained by it that it turned into like a meme fest on social media. People were laughing hysterically, but also really enjoying the performance. So the blurry pictures of, the Weeknd moving through that incredibly gold glitter maze, it really became a moment that everybody remembered about the show. So that stuff is really hard to do. And kudos to them. They pulled it off. He put $7 million of his own money into this show to make it great. He wanted to make it a cinematic experience. So what is completely not typical, the Weeknd invested his own money in his halftime show. And he says here, due to COVID and for the safety of the players and the workers, we built a stage within the stadium. We wanted to do something that we've never done before. And I feel like he did pull it off. There was one other unique way that the Weeknd did something that no other artist had ever done before. He sold merch, branded merch around his Super Bowl appearance. With touring and the way the streaming economy works with artists, there's less money than there were in the days of record sales. So artists are being more and more creative about what they do with touring and live performances. This is quite possibly one of the most creative branding things I have ever seen. And as you can see, these merch items they're not cheap, right? They're pretty exclusive, but this takes foresight and a team to plan it all in advance, to figure out what's going to look good, to do the design. I mean, you see the bomber jacket, how cool that looks, and the football and all these different offerings, get them up and, create a new experience for the fans. So this was highly unique, and I'll be very curious to see if this is something that this year's Super Bowl halftime performers, they take this cue from the Weeknd. I'm going to be definitely curious to see if they do that. So question, you think the artists lip sync during the halftime performance? Are they singing live? Well, yes and no. the main vocal of the artist, the main performer is live, but all the backing vocals are pre-recorded. And if there's something that the artist is doing specific that would inhibit their ability to sing, then that would be pre-recorded too. Maybe there's some part of the stage, or we'll get to what Lady Gaga did where she had to pre-record that. But most of the bands, almost every band, is absolutely pre-recorded. They don't do live. There was a few exceptions. The Rolling Stones, widely known as the greatest rock and roll band in the world, they were like, absolutely not. I'm Mick Jagger, I'm singing live, my band is live. So they insisted, and that created an extra complication because not only did the team that handles the production of the show have to push that stage out in 6 minutes, but they had to tune the drum, the guitar, the keyboards, all of that, what's known as the backline in music. They had to tune all of that in 6 minutes. And that's a process that usually takes over an hour for a normal tour. So they got it done, but amazing. Prince's guitar during his performance was live. Bruce Springsteen's guitar was live for his performance. Madonna, everything but her main vocal and parts of her main vocal were absolutely pre-recorded. Katy Perry, if you remember that performance, she rode in on a gigantic tiger during that section of her performance. She had some pre-recorded bits because she got nervous thinking if anything goes wrong or I drop my mic and it falls down to the ground 50 feet. So just to make sure, and this is why the artists go through so many rehearsals to get this done. She got a plan for any scenario whatsoever. So not all of it is live, but the main star usually is. So what about money, right? This is why artists do live performances. Touring is an income base for music artists. Do they get paid for this? Well, no, absolutely not. They get zero. The NFL does not pay halftime show appearance fee. Artists get all expenses covered for their performers, their cast members, their band members, management, whatever accompanying technical crew is required, security, all of that. And some of those are huge budgets. They can run into the $500,000-$600,000 range, but they don't get a personal appearance fee. The access to 100 million plus people and the platform for self-promotion is why artists do this. And the NFL has a pretty hefty budget to accomplish this as it is. It's between 13 and $16 million just to accomplish this 14 minutes. And it takes 2,000 to 3,000 people to do it. So yeah, it's not a paid gig, but it is the most coveted live gig in music for sure, just because of that incredible exposure and that opportunity to, have an iconic pop culture moment. And so yeah, no artists are complaining about not getting a fee for their Super Bowl halftime. So let's look at some memorable Super Bowl halftime shows, because there's been a lot of them. Here is Lady Gaga, and she definitely had a very memorable show where she was suspended and flying around parts of the stadium during big parts of her performance. This is an example of area or a part of the show where the artist would have pre-recorded vocals, because she is wearing a brace around her chest to, support her safely. You can't sing when you're being suspended. So it was still an incredible performance. The end was incredible, where she just disappeared at the end of her set and it left the audience speechless. So I think she did an incredible job delivering a really memorable performance. Prince in 2007 was another one that had incredible moments, but also kind of created some moments that stirred it up. And this was really that. There was a silhouette shot of Prince playing guitar on this blank canvas, and the projection of the shadow people thought was a little bit too risque for television. But also he was performing his #1 hit song, Purple Rain, and it literally started pouring rain during his performance. And that was the most memorable thing ever. You could see here in this picture, he is wet from the rainstorm that happened during his performance. So, stadiums are outside, so sometimes that happens. Madonna in 2012. You know, Madonna actually, for once, did not stir up most of the controversy with her performance. She had a couple of performers with her. And sometimes, you know, this is what happens with Super Bowl. Sometimes it's a collage of people, and sometimes it's just one performer. With Madonna, she shared the stage with Nicki Minaj, CeeLo Green, and then MIA. And for some reason that to this day, no one, including her, has a good explanation for, but during the halftime show, MIA gave the finger on live television, and you know, that's profanity, and it was a moment that didn't make sense with the show. So that kind of definitely created some real controversy and made that performance memorable. Beyonce. I mean, Beyonce, 3 years after headlining this show herself, she was part of Coldplay's, one of the featured performers when Coldplay performed. And she had just dropped this song Formation the very day before. Her coming out with the team of dancers dressed, paying a homage to the Black empowerment movement with the Black Panthers, that became a cultural moment. So much so that, you know, here's a headline from the New York Times the next day, completely stole the show right from under both Bruno Mars and Coldplay. It was Beyonce's show after that. And her performance afterwards was widely lauded as being culturally significant for some of the things. And she's you know, obviously a dynamic, beyond belief live performer. So absolutely one of the most memorable in terms of Super Bowl halftimes. Oh, Katy Perry. So there's the giant lion that when she was singing Roar that she came in on, and you can see she's singing there. That part right there is pre-recorded. She managed to wear 4 different costumes during a 12-minute performance. So that alone is an achievement, how they were able to do that. Again, it kind of speaks to the level of choreography that comes into accomplishing these performances. But then there was Left Shark. I don't know if you remember, she had a dancer that just did something weird on stage, and that became the meme moment, whether or not she could really control that. And now I have heard that she has worked Left Shark into her Vegas residency that she just started a couple of weeks ago. So she's had a good sense of humor about it. It was probably one of the most memorable parts of her specific performance, Left Shark. And then Jennifer Lopez and Shakira, their celebration and representation of Latino culture was groundbreaking for the Super Bowl. It was the first time in 54 years that the show had featured Latin artists singing in Spanish. Shakira, you know, belted out the chorus of her hit song Ajos Así, and J-Lo's daughter, Emmy, had Let's Get Loud, and they had the American and the Puerto Rican flags that they were flying during halftime. It was just such a celebration of the culture. They are both dynamic women in terms of their live performance. It was incredible. So really memorable. And like we talked about earlier, both of these ladies worked for an entire year before to prepare for this particular moment. And this is probably the most infamous Super Bowl halftime show ever, with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. We are still talking about this even today. In fact, the term wardrobe malfunction that we all hear about on every red carpet, that originated with this performance. That kind of went into the pop lexicon, even though when Justin Timberlake ripped that piece of costuming off, and he, you know, was an accident, it was 9/16 of a second that the exposure happened, but yet the outcry was pretty considerable. And both of them have in recent years continued to talk about this event. And how it individually affected each star in disproportionate ways, but definitely among the most memorable performances of all time was this, and particularly this moment. And then last year was not without its controversy for The Weeknd, but a lot of the controversy around what The Weeknd went through was behind the scenes. So The way that these television shows work with the bookings is they all want to have exclusively the biggest stars. And the Grammy Awards had a telecast that was happening 1 week later after the Super Bowl. And typically what they ask artists to do is not agree to any other live performances anywhere near the Super Bowl performance. You know, give us a month and a half window where you don't make any television appearances. So what you do for us at the Grammys is super exclusive. But as you saw with the Weeknd's quote that we talked about earlier, this is something that like is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So he was like, I can't turn down the Super Bowl. I have to do this performance. And as a result, he did not perform for the Grammys. And that album, After Hours, which has how many hit records from that album, it was completely shut out of all nominations from the Grammy Awards. And that was no accident. Everybody in the music industry knows that the Weeknd not getting any Grammy nominations for this phenomenal piece of work was directly connected to him refusing to perform for the Grammy Awards, but only because he had gotten the live gig of a lifetime. So, you know, is it fair? Leave that for everyone to decide amongst themselves. But yeah, this did happen last year. And then this year. So this year is historic. This is Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige, Dr. Dre, Eminem, and Kendrick Lamar. This is historic for a couple of different reasons. Number one, this is the first time that the NFL has ever booked hip hop artists as the headliner. And hip hop is, you know, beyond culturally significant. This is the highest and most successful form of Black art. Also, it's interesting that they have, they kind of just through this lineup are able to demonstrate the genre's reach across racial spheres. We have a white rapper with Eminem, across genre spheres because Mary J. Blige is an R&B singer. And then Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, you know, when they were making records in the 90s, they weren't necessarily celebrated. They got some, they stirred up a lot of controversy for the things that they talked about, the truth that they talked about. So it's such a full circle moment because Kendrick Lamar, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his last album, Damn, is an artist of the new generation that was inspired by the pioneering West Coast spirit of Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. The other amazing thing about this is that Dr. Dre has been fundamental in developing and discovering Snoop Dogg. He also discovered and developed Eminem, and he did the same with Kendrick Lamar. So I personally cannot wait to see this show. I think it'll be really exciting. Again, it's going to be incredibly culturally significant, and we'll see how these artists do on Sunday. They're all really, really compelling, exciting live performers. So looking forward to it. And that's all. Super Bowl halftime.
All right. Well, we want to thank Michelle for that amazing presentation. Thank you. And so I think at this time, Michelle, we can go through some of those questions that you see there from the chat. So I'll let you go ahead and I'll let you kind of go back and forth and answer those questions as we have here. Folks, please continue to put those into the chat and Michelle will get to those. And we've got a few minutes here. So Michelle, go ahead and fire away, and you know, hopefully we get some more questions from some of our lovely guests.
Okay, I've got one question here from Ellis. Is there data on the highest rated halftime performance? Yes, there is. It is Michael Jackson. Nobody has been able to break that record yet. So it remains as the highest rated Super Bowl halftime show of all time. Jillian says, my uncle was just texting me while you were talking and also was saying how incredibly complicated. He said the main are live. He has been, oh, he's a sound engineer. Yeah, I mean, the technical achievement of this show is absolutely incredible. The professionals who work on this show are at the top of their fields. What is the typical budget for halftime show? That's a message from Jennifer. So it's between $14 and $16 million, and probably more now because of the COVID protocols and having to, like, as I was explaining, having to layer some of the production staff so that if somebody has to isolate, they have someone else to step in. But the NFL pays for all of it. It's their halftime show, so they run the budget. Any insights into the show when the power went out? I don't remember what year that happened, so I don't have a specific insight, but I can't imagine the heart attack of the people who were doing that show. What are my thoughts on artists like Cardi B and Rihanna who turned down performing at the Super Bowl due to how the NFL treated Colin Kaepernick? My opinion about that is I support the artist's right to have their social message out there. Personally, I am from San Francisco. I also would like to see Colin Kaepernick get back in the league. So that is certainly, I support that sentiment. I am a senior in high school and I have a prospective student very interested in Newhouse. I was wondering how someone with a PR background would play a role in playing the halftime show. This is the biggest PR event of the year for a music artist. So there is PR opportunities for weeks running up to it. There are the PR opportunities that you're going to capture and all the content that you're going to capture when the show actually happens. And then you're going to make sure that everybody knows what happened after, weeks after that. Also, and this is, fingers crossed because I'm a fan, but a lot of artists use this as a platform to drop new music. The entire business is buzzing that Kendrick Lamar is going to drop new music after this halftime performance. We don't know that for sure, but visibility at this level gives you the perfect opportunity to, you're in front of 100 million people. There's no better way to let everyone know that you have a new record. And that is like fundamental to like what a PR person does. Your job is to let everybody know that something's going on. And I think that also, Sydney, hopefully that answers your question about how big of a role does PR play in the show. It's absolutely critical. Some viral moments, the weekend moment with the moving camera, that was absolutely planned to be viral. They had to be really creative about that because they had to make use of the stadium and they didn't have a crowd. So they had to figure out another way to engage the audience. And the best way to engage the audience is getting chattering on social media. And do I think pre-recording parts of the vocals takes away from the live aspect of the performance? Well, no, because actually I think it just helps deliver a polished performance. There's just so many eyes on this particular 14-minute piece of art that, what is the payoff to actually sing live and hit a bad note or, lose your breath, or there's just so many technical things that they can do now to just make it perfect that it just, to me, on a production level, just seems like an unnecessary risk. It didn't just rain, it poured. It poured during Prince's performance. And in fact, to the point that I was worried, like, he's playing an electric guitar in the rain. Yeah, I so agree. I still wonder what happened to the drenched grand piano on that stage. I actually don't know, Ken, but I had the exact same reaction watching Prince do that. It was like, these are instruments that are plugged in because we know the guitar was live. Zohar, how do people get involved in working on the halftime show performance? Is the artist crew or NFL crew or professionals hired? So the promoters, who are Rock Nation, and the parent company is Live Nation. So they have their production crews and they'll do a call. And this is something that, like, Ryan Bolton, who's our Newhouse alum, kind of let me in on, is that, you get a casting call, but you're not guaranteed. Like, Ryan's worked several Super Bowl shows, but he's not working this one because he's based in New York and the show is happening in Los Angeles. So I think location has something to do with it. Your availability has something to do with it. And then the needs of the actual production infrastructure have a lot to do with it as well. So how are artists selected? Well, I talked about this a little bit. The NFL is going to have the final say, and they're going to select an artist that has a very wide appeal, but is also at that time of the moment in some way. And that could be interpreted in a million different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be around new music. It just has to be something dynamic and unique to the moment. And again, they're booked a full year in advance. So they've probably got core lists of people that they would ultimately like to have. And like we pointed out earlier with Cardi B and Rihanna, not every artist agrees. Some will opt out. Has the pandemic had an effect on the halftime shows and the advertisements? This is a question from Jillian. Yes, I definitely in terms of the production it has. Last year, it had a specific effect because the Weeknd had to make use of an empty stadium and create a really dynamic show with no fans in the room. But I'll be curious to see how they deal with it this year, because there will be fans in the stadium in Los Angeles. Do I think, this is from Rob, do you think the Stones being so particular about doing everything live had anything to do with how bad they were? I just think they're the Rolling Stones, and they were not about to be pre-recorded. Like, they're old school, and it was an affront. Like, the stories about it were just that Mick was like, if you want me to do this, like, this is not up for discussion. I'm not lip syncing. I mean, that's just that's fundamental to who they are as a rock band. But possibly, because if you ever been to a live event in a stadium, this is part of the reason why they pre-record, those aren't acoustically ready venues. The sound ricochets off, so that's also part of the reason that they pre-record this stuff. Sydney, is bad publicity like MIA giving the finger still good publicity for the event? Not if it's something like that, because that was vulgar, and she didn't have any particular reason to do it. She was just trying to be cool, and that's like a wrong way to be cool. So that really backfired on MIA. She was on an upward trajectory with her career when that happened. Suddenly she wasn't. So you have to be careful with this event. What is the target demographic? This is from Jennifer. I think everybody knows the Super Bowl is literally everyone. It's families. Another reason why in terms of your presentation, this is not necessarily the moment to be really cutting edge or vulgar in any way. And that's another tragic thing about what happened with the Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson. It was not her fault that she got exposed. Her costume literally ripped open. But I think because you're dealing with families and everybody from little kids to grandparents who all watch the show at once, that's why it's such a coveted live event. It is everyone, and it's one of the few events in the world where it is literally everyone. So that's part of the excitement. I think I got to everyone. Any other questions?
Yes, continue to send any messages or questions to Michelle, and she'll be able to answer them. But Michelle, while we have you here, if you can talk a little bit about your background, and especially in working in the area with music and working with artists, and also you being a professor here at the Newhouse, and what courses do you teach within the Bandier program?
So I teach business of record labels and music publishers. So that's for Bandier. So that's a class that really kind of goes into how record companies operate and how publishing companies operate. I come from experience teaching that because I was a vice president for J Records. I also was a national director at RCA Records. So I've worked inside a couple of different major record companies. I worked with Clive Davis. I helped break Alicia Keys. And then in the other class that I teach for Bandier is the business of live music and experiential brand activation. I was an artist manager. I had a lot of different clients. I developed a lot of Dome Entertainment, my company. I developed digital content for artists that would go out on digital platforms in the early days before we even had the iPhone. With live touring, it's really about how these productions happen, sort of what I'm explaining with Super Bowl, but touring is there's prep involved in that too, and routing and the way the business fits together. Then there's the whole branding aspect and how artists pair with brands. So I use my experience working with Napster, working with record companies. Now I'm specifically excited about this year's Super Bowl because I used to run 2 radio stations on the West Coast. One was called KMEL in San Francisco. The other one was called 92.3 The Beat in Los Angeles throughout all of the 90s. And these were hip hop radio stations. So I have worked directly with Snoop Dogg for years, Dr. Dre, Kendrick Lamar. Like, these are artists that I literally have a history with. And I'm, and Eminem, who did in fact, Dr. Dre heard Eminem rap for the first time because he came in to my radio station and was rapping live on the air. And he was in LA and he heard it, and the rest is history. So I'm really excited, and I'm incredibly proud that it's gotten to this point where they're performing. Yeah, and I draw on all of this experience when I teach in the classroom. It's it's trying to share my knowledge and experience of the music business with some fundamentals about how it actually works. And that's part of the curriculum that we deliver at Bandier program and for Newhouse.
Awesome. So as we were chatting, looks like we got 2 questions here.
Okay.
So Jennifer has asked, is there a money reason it's on Sunday night and not Saturday? And do you think Saturday night would help families with young kids watch? Or do you not worry about that because the audience is already so massive?
You know what? That is an excellent question. I actually do not have an answer for why the NFL schedules Super Bowl on a Sunday. Maybe it's because they want to call it Super Bowl Sunday. I don't know. That's an excellent question. I don't know. On a halftime level, for the artists and the production involved, it could be on a Monday. They would make time to do that event. Are there any Bandier classes available for non-Bandier Newhouse students to take? I don't think so. Bandier, you have to be accepted into the program in order to take these specific classes that I teach, but I'm pretty sure that Newhouse has some adjacent music industry fundamental classes that you can take as part of Newhouse.
Yeah, there is the seminar course that Professor Bill Wordy teaches.
Resnick Lecture.
The Resnick Lecture series, where they will allow non-Bandier students to participate. And that's where they actually bring in people from the industry. And Michelle has mentioned about the people she's worked with. They come in and they talk to our students about what it is to work with an artist, or what it is to put out an album, or how long it takes. And also, how do you get your artists to the point where they are getting called for the Super Bowl, right? So, and that's what the Bandier program does, and also with the Newhouse School as well. So you don't necessarily have to be in the Bandier program to do music. We have all of our 8 majors, from advertising to public relations, magazine, news and digital journalism, broadcast, digital journalism, television, radio, and film, graphic design and photography, and of course the Bandier program, where our students can go in the area of not only sports, but also entertainment, and also into music and other things in communication. So, but definitely check that out, and check out our other programs as well. So we want to say to Michelle, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us this evening. It's such an amazing opportunity for us to learn from you, and a great presentation, and love always hearing about your background in the area of music, to the point where I often ask Michelle, like, what's the new album that's coming out? So she's really, really cool at doing with that. So I want to thank you all once again for joining us this evening. Thank you so much. And we want to thank the team that we have here. My colleague, Julie Wallace, that was here in the chat with us. Thank you, Julie, for being here. Brian, who is actually running the Zoom for us on the background, and also Sally, who helped us with the captioning. So once again, thank you. Please tune into any our other programs that we have as well. I'm going to share my screen with you all to show you our programs. We've got 2 of them actually tomorrow, so please check in. We've got the supercharged ads. This is about the Super Bowl ads that we love listening to, that we laugh and we cry about when we look at the Super Bowl. Professor Beth Egan will be doing that presentation. And then our behind the scenes and the production of all the Super Bowl and how everything goes down, More Than Tackles and Touchdowns by Professor Olivia Stomsky. So same way you register for these, you can register those directly online. I will go ahead and we will go ahead and put that into the chat so everybody can see that, so you can register for those events. So thank you for doing that. And we hope to see you at our other programs. And so I'm going to end it with a quote that Dr. Dre and actually Snoop tells people on their song, just chill to the next episode. All right. So thank you all for coming. Michelle, thank you so much. Thank you all. And like we say here, please be safe, stay healthy. And we like to end all of our programs by saying, go Orange.